Welcome everyone to another session of Bharat Ke Paramveer. I, Kaustubh Savan, on behalf of Indo-Science Education Trust, would like to hand over the mic to Veteran Group Captain Srikant Varwadkar sir and start this session.
Good evening, viewers. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you to the 18th episode of Bharat Ke Paramveer today on 21st March 2021. Yes, our daily respect for the 21 pyramid diamonds in the necklace of our Bharat Mata and a message for the young generation of Tumhare Hawale Watan Sathiyon. Today's hero, today's Bharat Ke Paramveer hero is Major Ramaswamy Parameshwaram. His date of birth, 30 September 1946 in Mumbai. He was commissioned initially as short service commission officer on 16 June 1972. Further, he got converted to permanent commission. And his date of shahadat was 25th November 1987. Major R. Parameshwaram. Life before joining army, Major Parameshwaram was born on 13 September 1946 in Mumbai. His father's name was K.S. Ramaswamy and mother Mrs. Janaki Ramaswamy. He did his schooling from SIES, South Indian Education Society of Mumbai. From that high school, he completed the high school in 1963 and further continued his graduation and was graduated from the college of the same society, South Indian Education Society, in 1968. In 1971, when in Pakistan, he joined OTA, Chennai, for training and was granted short service commission on 16 June 1972. He was posted to the 15th Mahar of Indian Army. Subsequently, he was granted permanent commission. He was promoted to the rank of captain on 12th October 1999 and major on 31st July 1984. 28th May 1983, we got commission. I got commission. He was very gentle and affable officer who could bring cheer to any gathering. He got married to Uma in May 1981. Uma was a poet and a writer. The compatibility between the two made them a very, very affectionate family for the unit officers, especially the bachelor officers who would call on them on weekends. And Major Parameshwaram, being a good host, would cook and feed them South Indian delicacies like idli and dosa. He was affectionately called by all as Pari or Pari Sahab. He was remembered as a very committed and dedicated officer who liked to lead by example. He served in 15 Mahar for 8 years, and in April 83, he was sent to 5 Mahar. Life after joining army, I noticed I make two different slides because life changes after you join the armed forces. So one slide will tell you about the life before joining the army and the life after joining the army. So now our hero, Major Parameshwaran, his life after joining army. He was commissioned in 15 Mahar as told earlier, battalion on 16 June 1972 as SSC officer, short service commission officer, after passing out from OTA Chennai, Officers Training Academy, Chennai. He served in the unit for 8 years and when he was transferred to 5 Mahar Battalion in April 1983. He participated in counter-insurgency operations in Northeast and soon earned a reputation of an officer with steely resolve and unfaltering leadership skills. He was affectionately called as Pari Sahab by his men. In any challenging operations undertaken by his unit, he was always at the forefront to lead his men by example. When Indian Peacekeeping Force Accord was signed between the two governments, he was handpicked along with 8 Mahar unit because he was able to, he was the only one who could speak Tamil as a necessary in Sri Lanka during that time. 8 Mahar was one of the first Indian Army units to land in Sri Lanka for implementation of the peacekeeping accord on 31st August 1987. Historian for the Sri Lanka crisis. Let's go. Since I participated in that operation, I would like to give slightly detailed information about these crises. British colonies took Tamilians from Tamil Nadu, India, as tea plantation workers. These workers, over a period of time, settled in north and east of Sri Lanka. On 4th February 1948, British Ceylon granted independence from British Empire as Dominion of Ceylon. It became republic within the Commonwealth and name got changed to Sri Lanka. Sinhalese majority government was instituted. This government, inclusive of the Tamil Congress, passed a legislation. This legislation, deemed to be discriminatory by some against Tamil minority in Sri Lanka. In 1970s, Tamil Congress split into Tamil Congress and TULF, Tamil United Liberation Front. Separatist Tamil nationalist group agitated for a separate state of Tamilam in north and eastern Sri Lanka to get greater autonomy within the federal structure. 1988, Sixth Amendment to Sri Lankan Constitution of August 1983 classified all separatist movements as unconstitutional. TULF was considered as too passive organization, and more factions cropped up with the intention of resorting to violence to press the demand for more autonomy and further separate independent state for Tamilians. One of them, and the strongest, being the LTTE, Liberation Tiger Tamil Elam, under their leader Velupillai Prabhakaran. The strong support to the Tamil cause and the Tamil insurrection in Sri Lanka from the Tamil Nadu Indian state, resulting in the sympathy from the government of India, and initially under the Prime Ministership of Indira Gandhi and later Rajiv Gandhi. LTT emerged as the strongest force on the island by killing the leaders of other rival Tamil factions ruthlessly. Civil violence flared up in 1983, killing of 13 soldiers of Sri Lankan army, resulting in Tamil pogroms, Black July riots called, killing around 3,000 Tamils as a response from the Sri Lankan army. In 1985, attack of Anuradhapura on Bodhi Tree Shrine, followed by a rampage through the town, killing 150 civilians in an hour. The violence is overriding now. It's overtaking everything for the demand. Ethnic relations deteriorated, large-scale recruitment by LTT and other factions on the basis of popular Tamil descent building up was going on. Government of India tried to re-establish friendly relations between various factions in Sri Lanka while maintaining diplomatic efforts to find solution to the conflict, as well as limiting overt aid to Tamil fighters. Sri Lankan government, with support from Pakistan, Israel, Singapore, and South Africa, began rearming itself for anti-insurgency operations. In 1986, anti-insurgency activities by Sri Lankan armed forces were stepped up. In 1987, in Vedamarachi operation in Jaffna, stronghold of LTTE, Sri Lankan armed forces launched a joint operation involving around 4,000 troops, helicopter gunships, as well as ground attack aircraft of Sri Lankan Air Force participated. In June 1987, siege of town of Jaffna resulting in large-scale civilian casualties and deaths. In order to avoid Tamil backlash in India and seeing the increase in activities of the Pakistan, the Indian government asked Sri Lankan government to halt the offensive against civilian Tamil population, but the appeal was unheeded. On 2nd June 1987, Indian government announced that it would send convoy of unarmed ships of Indian to provide humanitarian assistance in the northern Sri Lanka. The Tamilians, they're part of Indians, so we can't keep silently just watching, doing nothing. It was intercepted, this convoy, unarmed convoy with relief material was intercepted by the Sri Lankan Navy, and the discussions failed and was forced to return. A decision was taken by Indian government to airdrop the relief supplies to the beleaguered civilians over the besieged Jaffna city. On 4 June 1987, Operation Pumalai by Indian Air Force with 5 AN-32 aircraft with relief material escorted by the Mirages of Indian Air Force. On 29 July 1987, Indo-Sri Lanka Peace Accord was signed between the then President of Sri Lanka, J.R. Jayawardene, who was later killed, and Indian Prime Minister Sri Rajiv Gandhi, who also was killed subsequently. It resulted in temporary truce. However, the LTTE was not included as a party to the talks. In fact, they absented themselves. As with the terms and conditions of the accord, Sri Lanka agreed to dwell more power to the provincial government in north and east. Sri Lankan troops would return to barracks and Tamil rebels were to be disarmed. It also provided that IPKF, Indian Peacekeeping Force, would guarantee and enforce the cessation of hostilities and a commitment on the part of the Indian government to provide Indian military assistance on request from the Sri Lankan government as and when requested. Based on these terms and conditions and request from the President of Sri Lanka, contingent of Indian Armed Forces was inducted in northern Jaffna. There was large-scale riots and opposition to the peace accord in Sri Lanka. Sri Lankans treated it as a direct attack on their sovereignty. IPKF operations in Sri Lanka started immediately after signing of the accord in July 1987 and continued till March 1990. Failure of the accord. IPKF operations in Sri Lanka are equated with the United States of America operations in Vietnam and is termed as the India's Vietnam by international media. Initially, Indian Army troops were about 10,000 in number from 54th Infantry Division, which flew to Palali Air Base. I was posted there in Palali. The name is KKS, Kake Santurai Air Base, on 30th July 1987 with small elements of IAF and Indian Navy for supporting role. However, as the situations changed, goalposts changed, and at its peak, Indian Army deployed 4 divisions with 80,000 soldiers, with 4th Mountain Division and 3 infantry divisions, 36th, 54th, and 57th, as well as supporting arms and services. It also included Indian paramilitary forces and Indian special forces because Indian armed forces were now to be used for the combat operations, which was never thought of, but situations changed. Indian Peacekeeping Force was supposed to disarm all the militant factions, including LTTE, followed by conduct of elections in a peaceful atmosphere. Indian Army was not expected to be involved in any combat role whatsoever. However, the role of IPKF changed and got involved in combat operations to disarm LTTE and enforce peace. The irony was IPKF was fighting with an enemy having total support and sympathy from one of her own states. Indian Navy commandos, the Marcos, were deployed first time in this operation. The specialty of these operations is that the Indian Navy commandos, Marcos, were deployed for the first time in the operations. My opinion, And clearly, I'll say it's my personal opinion that 1962 war and IPK operations in Sri Lanka of 1987 to 1990 are the examples how war should not be undertaken. Lessons are for the political leaders, bureaucrats, and the military leaders. Harder way to learn. Because, as stated in one of the previous presentations, it is very, very appropriately stated that war is started by politicians, complicated by bureaucrats, and fought by soldiers. I wish to add from my side further that war is started by politicians, complicated by bureaucrats, fought by soldiers, and suffered by entire nation and her present and future generations. The economy goes back 10 years. Nobody is a winner. The party which loses, the country which loses less, we call it a winner. Very difficult war was fought where many brave soldiers lost their lives. Without proper maps, guidance, authentic and reliable intelligence inputs, Indian armed forces had to face the enemy at disadvantage. Demoralizing fact was that the LTT received total support from Tamils to fight against the Indian soldiers. Major Ramaswamy Parameshwaran of 5 Mahar was handpicked from 8 Mahar, first unit to land in Kankesundure Airport, KKS, as part of IPKF operations, because he was the one who could speak Tamil. Just a month or 20 days after joining 8 Mahar, while taking part in Operation Pawan, as part of 91 Infantry Brigade of 54th Infantry Division, that young Pari Saab attained martyrdom in the Battle of Kanthodai of 24 November 1987. Strangely enough, on 23rd November 1987, Mrs. Uma was very upset in her quarters at Dehradun because her Mangal Sutra had broken. She continued to stay there after Pari had left for Sri Lanka operations. She was very upset and took it as a bad omen. But her friends, wives of Pari's colleagues told her not to be superstitious. But after 2 days, she received the news that her husband had lost his life fighting the Tamil rebels in Sri Lanka. She was completely shattered. With just 4 years of married life, it was a very, very traumatic experience for any lady. She has since been remarried and hopefully has picked up the pieces of her life. November 1987, northern Sri Lanka. It's 1900 hours evening of 24th November 1987, and Alpha Company of 8 Mahar are marching towards Kanthodai with ready-to-fire self-loading rifles in their hands. Intelligence input is received that a consignment of arms and ammunition is being unloaded at the house of Dharmalingam, the Kanthodai village headman, Sarpanch. The patrol of 10 soldiers is led by Captain D.R. Sharma, second in command of the company. Kanthodai is a small village comprising of a few huts surrounded by dense coconut groves. Soldiers have to walk as quietly as feasible and find their way in the dark with limited navigational information. Peculiar to any coastal village, the area is swampy, filled with coconut trees and deep undergrowth, extremely humid climate. There are no street lights and they have been instructed not to use any lights to avoid getting detected. Captain Sharma has an uneasy and nagging feeling that they are being watched. 2 eyes are watching them. Very nagging and uneasy feeling Captain Sharma gets it. Captain Sharma reports to his company commander Major Parameshwaran that they have been fired upon by LTT militants from a nearby temple and they are outnumbered by the enemy. Major Pari immediately puts another patrol of 20 Jawans and JCO Sampath Sabre and joins up with the first patrol. It's around midnight that the combined patrol of 30 soldiers led by Major Pari moves towards village Kanthodai. It starts raining slowly. All soldiers cover their mouths of their rifles with polythene sheets. They prefer to get wet in the slow falling rain instead of using inconvenient ponchos. It's better to get wet than become inconvenient by wearing the raincoats. Around 1:30 midnight in the morning of 25th November, they reach Dharmalingam's house. Weather has worsened with heavy rain pouring now. The target house is in dark and everyone seems to be sleeping in the house in the darkness. Sky lights up momentarily due to lightning and is accompanied by sound of thunder. Every individual soul in the patrol part is drenched and the water is seeping out of their heavy wood-soled DMS boots and socks, making it heavy and uncomfortable with moisture. They surround the house and position themselves in squat position just 800 meters from it in groups of 10. Three groups, one led by Major Parry, second led by Captain Sharma, and third led by JCO Sampath Sabare. You will come across various Maharashtrian names because this is Maha Regiment. So majority of them would be Maharashtrian names. No movement is observed. However, they see an old truck parked nearby next of what appears as a garage. This provides possible credibility to the news of unloading of weapon consignment. They are told not to move or make noise, not even cough or relieve themselves to nature's call. After 4 hours sitting like this, at 5:30 hours in the morning, the family's dog starts barking and Parry decides to move and search the house. Parry, Captain Sharma and the radio operator Dilip Maske go in the house while other soldiers close in on high alert outside. They bring out Dharmalingam and his family. A thorough search yields nothing suspicious. And it is decided that the patrol will return to headquarters at Woodville village following tarred road to avoid marshy waterlogged terrain and get ambushed by LTT. Unfortunately for them, the road goes past a pond with 3 temples around it where LTT militants had sought shelter. Unaware of this, the patrol party of 30 soldiers and Captain Sharma and led by Major Parameshwaran are unaware that they have been spotted and are being watched silently by the enemy LTT. And LTT is waiting for appropriate moment to strike. It's 6:30 in the morning of 25th of 1987. Tired, rain-soaked, and sleep-deprived soldiers are walking past the pond when a burst of HM hits Sipai Jivan Athole. Sipai Jagan Lal, who was walking behind Jivan Athole, shoots down a militant but is caught in a burst of LMG. Militants open fire from all the 3 temples, scattering the entire patrol. Veteran Subedar Dilip Maske, who is working in a security firm in Aurangabad, recalls that 3 groups of 10 soldiers each were led by JCO Sampath Sabare, Captain Sharma and Major Parameshwaran, and in that sequence they were walking on the road. The soldiers, after firing, immediately drop on the ground and Parry tells them to take cover in the forest on the other side of the road. Everybody moves there, but it becomes difficult to fire at the enemy from the jungle. So many obstacles, and the distance is increased. Parry and Sharma decide to move in from east and west and north, respectively. Captain Sharma and Sipai Jarnail Singh pick up their rocket launchers, enter the pond to get an open space to fire at the militants. However, due to heavy HMG fire from the enemy, they cannot respond. Sipai Jarnail Singh is hit by the LMG burst on his left leg. Crippled, Jarnail moves to an under construction house nearby. Sharma's team decides to take shelter there. There are 2 more nearby houses where the Indian soldiers move. They have unknowingly walked into a trap and enemy ambush. Soldiers face heavy firing from all directions. The militants have positioned in the spaces under the ceiling and even on top of the coconut trees. Captain Sharma and JCO Sampath Ji, along with their soldiers, have walked into the LTT ambush. Radio operator Vidyasagar Dongre and Ramesh Athawale are injured. Rajan, trying to return fire with mortar fire, is hit by a burst and is immediately killed on the spot. Ganesh Kole, handling LMG, is shot dead. LTT is using AK-47s, grenades, explosives, and deadly HMGs. Majority of them received from the Indian state. This inflicted maximum damages. They have even mined this area. So many challenges. Major Parry sees the firing on the two groups of his company and decides to step in to save his precious men. Musket recounts Parry Saab telling them that they will go from behind and do a counter ambush and rescue our men. This is the quality. Our men, every soldier is my person. He has to be saved. He has to be rescued. Taking 10 men with him, Parry moves forward. Sipai Rajkumar Sharma and Rana Nayak Pandurang Dhobale are with him. However, the group breaks up due to intense firing directed at them. Parry does not lose his cool even for a moment. I keep seeing on the Facebooks, cool, cool. So this is the situation where the real coolingness comes up in the personality. He fixes the LMG and tells Rajkumar to fire at the militants so that rest can move forward under its cover. Rajkumar had just started firing as planned when an AK-47 burst from treetop, hits him and he falls. Soldiers are pinned down by the continuous firing. Major Parry doesn't get cowed down and without any concern for his own safety, he drops on his stomach and crawls forward through coconut grooves where many of the trees have been chopped to above 5 feet height. Taking cover behind these tree stumps, he fires at the militants. The surprised LTT militants realize that they have been surrounded. The objective of surprising the enemy has been achieved. Just then, an HMG burst from a sniper sitting on top of the coconut tree hits his left wrist, smashing the bone, severing his left hand. His wristwatch flies off from the damaged wrist. Even as his men watch shockingly, Parry moves with a lightning speed to the nearest militant, snatches his weapon and kills him, and then tells his men to follow him. Just then, another HMG burst hits him in the chest. In his pocket, he has a mini flare signal pistol, which is used to send a success signal by firing. These cartridges burst now, with the HMG hitting his chest, and the cartridges burst on his chest, and the brave officer collapses, falling on his face in front of his jawans. When his body was recovered by Captain Sharma after an hour, his wristwatch was found lying nearby his body and it had stopped at 0810 hours. Reinforcements arrived under the command of Captain T.C. Bhattacharya with 20 ORs, and they start firing at the three temples. Captain Bhattacharya enters the first temple and manages to catch a militant, extracts information from him about details of hideout from where 3 AK-47s, 2 rocket launchers, 200 booster charges, and 100 kg of explosives are recovered. Remember just how prepared they were. One more team under the command of Major Devendra Brar with 25 soldiers arrive and help Musket and Ankush Wagmare move forward and retrieve Parry's body. His body was immediately on the same day sent to Chennai for the last rites. For his gallant act of bravery, exemplary leadership, and command, Major Ramaswamy Parameshwaran was given the nation's highest gallantry award, Paramveer Chakra. His cold courage, indomitable fighting spirit, and supreme sacrifice represent the true spirit of Indian Armed Forces and make us all veterans proud to have served in such a wonderful organization, services in the service of the nation. That makes our life meaningful. Major Parameshwaran became the sole recipient of Paramveer Chakra Award from the IPK of Operations in Sri Lanka and first from the OTA Chennai to get the coveted award. Today, we all will fail in our duty if we do not remember every individual known soldier of 5 Mahar who were martyred, along with Major R. Parameshwaran, or who got injured, and their suffering family members we must remember today. A few of the known names that could be found from the available material are Sipai Jarnail Singh got killed, Naik Appanna Sarjay got killed, both were martyred. Radio operator Vidyasagar Dongre, Ramesh Athawale, Rajan Lal got killed, Milind Kole got killed, Sipai Rajkumar Sharma, and Major Ramaswamy Parameshwaran Paramveer Chakra got killed. On 25th November 1987, when Major Ramaswamy Parameshwaran was returning from search operation in Sri Lanka, late at night, his column was ambushed by a group of militants. With cool presence of mind, he encircled the militants from the rear and charged into them, taking them completely by surprise. During the hand-to-hand combat, a militant shot him in the chest. Undaunted, Major Parameshwaran snatched the rifle from the militant and shot him dead. Gravely wounded, he continued to give orders and inspired his command till he breathed last. 5 militants were killed and 3 rifles and 2 rocket launchers were recovered and the ambush was cleared. Major Ramaswamy Parameshwaran displayed the most conspicuous gallantry and thought nothing of dying at his post. What a commitment, what a dedication for the nation. Young man is an energy of the nation, future of the nation. We elders owe a lot to them. They grow meaningfully, India grows meaningfully, and we have something to contribute to that. Food for thought. Soldiers don't die when bullets pierce their hearts and heads through their uniforms. They don't die when they fall before an enemy onslaught, or even when they get buried in trenches, staining the earth with their warm crimson blood, worshipping Mother India with their warm crimson blood, as per traditions of Indian Armed Forces. It is only when we forget their acts of bravery and or suffering of their physically alive families that the soldiers really die. Rachna Bishrawat in The Brave. May appeal to every individual, every Indian, you should not be one of them. Can we elders realize our obligation towards the future of the nation, to the young generation? Because they grow, my nation grows. As a patriotism, as a patriotic Indian, we must help them. The target of my life now is that not a single boy or girl, after coming in contact with me, will say that he or she did not try to join armed forces for lack of information. So I feel in our every field, we can certainly create these young generations as an asset for the nation. Look at this, is the energy of the nation. This young girls, these boys, whether it is village or colleges, metropolitan cities, it doesn't matter. The personality that is developed is important. And that is what is required in the armed forces. Acknowledgement, I wish to express sincere thanks and acknowledge the following sources for their contribution to completion of this presentation. Photograph of the statue at National War Memorial, New Delhi, this source. Then there are total 8 sources from which were very, very helpful for me, and I acknowledge that and express my sincere thanks to these sources. Finally, Jai Hind, Bharat Mata Ki Jai.